You, with your unimpressive demeanor, don't deserve the drinks in this bar. Just the perfect timing. It's raining outside. Why don't you go drink some rainwater? That suits you better." After being laid off, I was dragging around a heavy heart, and at the bar, I bumped into my obnoxious former boss, who snatched my seat. But then, an unexpected person appeared, and the situation took a dramatic turn. My name is Michael. I'm 59 years old and work at a small toy company called Colorado Toys. I can say I'm great at socializing. I've always been rather poor at it. However, I always tried to be as polite as possible to my colleagues and superiors, and I even developed a hit product. But my accomplishments were usurped by my colleague, Kevin, preventing my advancement. Kevin was really good at showing himself in a positive light. He would dump troublesome tasks on others, yet talk as if he had struggled through them himself. My inability to articulate well didn't help my standing with the bosses. I couldn't liven up the mood at drinking parties, and even got scolded for not speaking up more. Kevin climbed the ladder successfully and became my boss. He looked down on me completely. "Useless old men who stay at the bottom are just a waste. We don't need men who can't advance." It was normal for him to spew such insults. "You live alone, right? You must be bored at home. You should work overtime and contribute a bit more to the company." He would often force me to do overtime. Though it's painful to admit, Kevin was right in a way. When I go home, there's no one there, and I have nothing to do. I used to live with my wife and child. My wife was an amazing woman, too good for me, always smiling and devoted to housework and child-rearing. When our son Jason was born, our home became livelier. Jason loved music from a young age and started piano lessons. The sound of the piano became a daily occurrence in our house. He also loved playing with the toys I made. Seeing my son play with my creations made me feel my job was worthwhile. Even if work didn't go well, as long as my family was happy, that was enough for me. But those peaceful days didn't last long. When I was still 30, my wife passed away due to illness. Left behind, I was in a daze of grief. I was at a loss on how to live after losing my wife. But I had Jason. I couldn't afford to be down forever. So began my days of focusing on home life. Embarrassingly, I had left most of the housework and child-rearing to my wife, so at first, I struggled a lot. My cooking was always burnt, and Jason would complain it was awful. But what was more challenging was taking care of Jason. About a month after my wife passed, he began to frequently throw tantrums, saying, "I want Mom. Let me see Mom." I felt the same way about wanting to see my wife. Holding Jason tightly with a heavy heart, I managed to say, "I'll do my best for both of me and Mom." What would someone eloquent say in such a situation? I resented my own lack of eloquence. It was tough at first, but as time went on, I gradually got used to the household chores and became more efficient at them. As Jason grew up, he seemed to understand our family situation and started to help me out, which was a great relief. As he entered his teenage years, our conversations decreased, but he continued to help with the chores. Furthermore, on his 21st birthday, Jason said, "Thanks for raising me all these years." I was deeply moved by this and couldn't help but cry. It's a great relief to see him grow up into such a kind person. Jason moved out when he graduated from college to live on his own. I was happy to see him become independent, but the loneliness outweighed my happiness. Living in an empty house turned out to be lonelier than I had imagined. Before I knew it, I had aged and suddenly found myself at 59. One day, when I went to work, Kevin approached me with a smug grin. I had a bad feeling about it. The first thing he said was shocking. "You're fired." I was stunned by the suddenness of it. My mind went blank. May I ask why? I asked with a trembling voice. Kevin continued, almost gleefully. Did you forget? I mentioned a while ago about downsizing due to poor performance. You're a 59-year-old low-level employee. It's not a big deal if you're let go. Just so you know, this was a decision from the top. Don't blame me. I thought the downsizing was supposed to focus on those with poor work attitudes. Though I found it unfair, I couldn't argue. I hadn't caused any trouble, but on the surface, I hadn't achieved anything notable either. I quickly resigned myself to the fact that being fired was inevitable. Seeing me downcast, Kevin looked even more amused. Enjoy the little time you have left in your working life. Goodbye. Watching Kevin walk away triumphantly, I was convinced that my life was now on a downward slope. I had to tell Jason about being fired. It was hard to say, but I couldn't keep it from him forever. When I called him, somewhat apprehensively, Jason's reaction was surprisingly gentle. Dad, you've done enough. Now you can relax as much as you want. I was grateful to my son, who didn't blame me but instead comforted me. However, life after retirement was tougher than I imagined. Initially, I felt at ease without Kevin's harassment, but I soon found myself aimlessly drifting through each day, unfulfilled. Watching TV didn't really lift my spirits. I had thought work was tough because of Kevin, but after leaving, I realized I had taken pride in developing toys. Imagining the joy of children playing with the toys I created was enjoyable. Unable to find new sources of pleasure, I became increasingly despondent 6 months after retirement. I started to lose sight of what I was living for. Sometimes I would murmur to my wife's portrait, "What should I do now?" While pondering this, I happened to see a TV feature on must-visit scenic spots. It's not that I had any particular interest. I just tuned in because I had nothing else to do. While watching aimlessly, a beautiful waterfall caught my eye. It was located in a forest and had recently become popular as a power spot. The waterfall was so beautiful, it felt like it cleansed my soul, and I found myself mesmerized by it. I realized that I had been living in the hustle and bustle of the city for so long, without ever really connecting with nature. To change my mood, I decided to actually visit the place. It had been a while since I had felt the urge to do something on my own. Leaving my recent gloom behind, I quickly prepared for the trip. Before I knew it, the day of the trip arrived. I arrived at my destination without hesitation and stepped into the forest. The air was crisp and refreshing. The greenery of the trees was beautiful. Although the waterfall was still ahead, I knew coming here was the right choice. After about an hour of walking, the scenery opened up, and the waterfall appeared. It was even more beautiful and impressive than in the videos. Just watching the water cascade down was soothing to my soul. I could understand why it was called a power spot. It was a weekday, so there were few people around. As I was thinking of finding a spot to sit and enjoy the view, I noticed a woman sitting next to a large tree. She looked to be in her 20s. Her shoe was off and was looking at her foot. Her foot was swollen, and her beautiful face seemed to be in pain. I instinctively called out to her. "Are you okay?" Startled by a stranger suddenly speaking to her, she forced a smile. "Yes, I'm fine. It's just," her foot was clearly swollen, and it didn't look good at all. It would take an hour to walk out of the forest. Going back alone seemed difficult. "Excuse me, I have time, and if you don't mind, I can drive you to a hospital. I came to the entrance of this forest by rental car, so I can give you a lift. Please don't push yourself." The woman hesitated, but I assured her, "Please don't feel obliged." Eventually, she relented and said, "Please, I would appreciate that." I twisted my ankle walking in the forest. I didn't want to return without seeing the waterfall, so I pushed myself, but it got worse. I supported her out of the forest and drove to the hospital in my rental car. The doctor said, "It's not serious, but you need to rest for a while." Afterward, I took her to the hotel where she was staying. Her name was Emily, and she loved traveling. Emily told me about the various tourist places she had visited. She was a great storyteller, and listening to her made me want to visit those places. Surprisingly, for me, the conversation flowed smoothly even though it was our first meeting. We continued chatting even after arriving at her hotel room. I didn't have any other plans besides seeing the waterfall, and Emily, unable to go out due to her injury, wanted me to stay and keep her company. During our conversation, I learned that Emily lived in the same town as me and even knew about my former workplace. It's surprising how well she knew about such a small company. Eventually, the topic changed and she asked, "Why did you come here, Michael?" After some hesitation and wondering where to start, I ended up telling her everything from the beginning. Well, actually, I got fired from my job. Despite it not being the kind of story you typically share with someone you just met, Emily listened to it all. It turned out that she had also quit her job due to exhausting office relationships and understood my situation. Her love for travel began as a way to refresh herself by visiting different places around the country. "For all the hardship you faced, I'm sure good things are ahead in your life," she comforted me. Her empathy touched me deeply, and I was grateful. Despite the unexpected events, it turned out to be a heartwarming trip. After returning from the trip, I received a call from Jason. He invited me out, saying, "There's a great bar I know. How about we go for a drink? It may be nosy of me, but I was worried you might have been feeling lonely, dead. Let's go out and have a good time. I have a lot to talk about too." Nosy? Not at all. It's true that I've been living a lonely life lately. I appreciated Jason's concern. Come to think of it, it had been a long time since Jason and I had a drink together. I think the last time was on his 21st birthday. The thought of drinking with my son after so long lifted my spirits, and I quickly agreed. Unfortunately, it was pouring rain on the day of our appointment. Still, the thought of seeing Jason made the rain seem less bothersome. I took the train and arrived at the designated bar, but Jason hadn't arrived yet. He had told me it was a popular place, and indeed, most of the seats were filled. Luckily, there was one seat near the entrance that was empty, so I took it. As I was looking at the menu, the door of the bar opened. I casually glanced up and was shocked. It was Kevin who had walked in. He also noticed me and initially looked surprised, but his expression quickly turned mocking. Well, what a coincidence to see you here, enjoying life after getting fired," he said, and uninvited, sat opposite me. My son is supposed to join me soon. I'm sorry, but could you please find another seat?" I hesitated but protested. Kevin's eyes narrowed. "Why should I care? I want to drink here too. Besides, I'm a regular at this bar. I should be given priority." I thought his demand was ridiculous, but Kevin kept pressing. "Someone as dull as you doesn't deserve to drink here. It's raining, so why don't you go outside and drink rainwater? That suits you better." Kevin dismissively waved his hand, snatched the menu from me, and started looking through it. It seemed unlikely he would move just by a few words of request. Not wanting to cause a scene and disturb the bar, I decided to wait for another seat to open up. I reluctantly stood up from my seat. Noticing the concerned look from the waiter, I assured them, "It's fine, I can take another seat." Just then, the door of the bar opened again. Two people entered. One was Jason, but to my surprise, the other was Emily. "What a coincidence to meet here. This is amazing," I exclaimed, surprised. Although I was taken aback, Emily seemed as if she had anticipated this encounter. "Meeting you here isn't a coincidence. Actually, Jason and I know each other and have an important matter to discuss. So we came together. I was bewildered by this sudden turn of events. The fact that Jason and Emily knew each other was surprising enough, but what could this important matter be? We'd like to talk right away, but it seems the place is full, Emily observed, looking around the bar with a disappointed expression. Then, her face lit up as she spotted Kevin. Could it be that she also knew Kevin? Kevin noticed Emily staring and snapped, "What? Stop staring. It's rude." Unintimidated, Emily confidently approached his table and sat down without asking. "Since Kevin is here, let's discuss everything now. It's a very important matter, so I'll take a seat. Michael, please sit down too. I want you to hear this." Surprised by Emily's assertive attitude, I sat down as she instructed. "Who the hell are you, being so rude?" Kevin demanded. Emily then revealed something unexpected. "Sorry for not introducing myself earlier. I am the daughter of the president of Colorado Toys. My name is Emily." "What?" I exclaimed in surprise. Meeting the daughter of the president of the company I used to work for by chance while traveling was an incredible stroke of luck. Kevin was visibly taken aback. Emily continued her story. "I recently met Michael. He's such a kind person, and it didn't seem right that he was fired. I asked my father why such a nice man was let go. He told me it was because he received reports of poor work performance. But I couldn't believe it and shared with my father the story of our encounter during my travels, insisting on a proper investigation. My father agreed to look into it, seeing how earnestly I pleaded." Emily glared sharply at Kevin. It turned out that Kevin had lied about Michael's work performance, saying it was poor, negatively influencing the management's opinion of him. "What evidence do you have for that? It's a false accusation," Kevin protested, his face turning pale. Emily remained calm. "We obtained testimonies from Michael's former colleagues. They all unanimously said Michael was a good person. It's strange that he was fired. Those traitors." Kevin's face now turned red with anger. Emily spoke with an air of disdain. "If you must blame someone, blame yourself for your foolish actions. You will soon face the consequences. Be prepared." "What? Don't mess with me." Kevin stood up, moving aggressively towards Emily. I was about to intervene when a stern-looking waiter approached. His name tag read Manager Brian. He gave Kevin a stern look. "Sir, I'm sorry to interrupt, but could you please leave? Your loud voice is disturbing other customers." "How dare you speak to a regular like me that way?" Despite Kevin's high-handed attitude, Brian, the manager, responded firmly in a low voice. "I'll just say it as it is. You're a troublesome customer. When you get drunk, you cause issues with other patrons. And we've received complaints asking us to deal with it. We'd rather not have a regular like you." Chastened by Brian, Kevin turned pale and hurriedly left the bar. I thanked Brian. "Thank you so much. You really helped us out." "It's no problem at all," Brian replied with a hearty smile before returning to the back of the bar. Afterward, Jason, Emily, and I decided to have a good time together. Emily and Jason had two important things to share. The first was about Kevin's misconduct. It was pure coincidence that Kevin was at the bar, and both were as surprised as I was. The second was a delightful piece of news. Emily and Jason were in a relationship and considering marriage. Their meeting story was quite touching. Emily, after graduating from university, had joined a major corporation on her own merit. However, once her identity as a company president's daughter became known, baseless rumors spread that she had gotten the job through connections. No matter how hard she worked, she couldn't gain trust, leading to a difficult time. One day, she saw a man playing street piano at a station. It was Jason. After graduating from a music college, Jason had been working as a pianist, performing across the country. According to Emily, Jason's performance was wonderful, and just listening to it felt like a balm for her soul. She approached Jason to thank him after his performance, but she was so moved that she found herself in tears. Concerned, Jason listened to her story and suggested she travel around the country. He often traveled for work and believed unexpected encounters and discoveries enriched the heart. Upon hearing that, Emily decided to quit her job and set out on her travels. As she kept in touch with Jason during her journey, they grew closer and eventually started dating. Jason had arranged this meetup to introduce Emily and simultaneously cheer me up. Naturally, I supported their relationship and congratulated them. "Congratulations, I'm looking forward to the wedding." Jason, laughing, said, "We haven't even decided when to get married yet. You're getting ahead of yourself," but he looked pleased. The three of us then enjoyed a pleasant meal and drinks together. It seemed that Brian, the manager, had overheard our conversation, as he kindly provided us with some complimentary dishes. Thus, the enjoyable night wore on. A few days after the incident at the bar, I heard from Emily that Kevin had been fired. It turned out he was not only harassing others, but also embezzling company funds. Apparently, his family had enough and left him. Meanwhile, I returned to work and got involved in toy development again. My past achievements were recognized, and I was promoted. Now able to fully utilize my skills, I launched IT products one after another, contributing greatly to the company's growth. Many consumers thanked me for the wonderful toys, which was incredibly gratifying. Jason and Emily were also delighted with my success. As kids, they loved the toys I developed, so their happiness meant even more to me. Recently, they celebrated their wedding. They are now enjoying a blissful married life. Influenced by Emily, I've grown quite fond of traveling, often taking trips on weekends. My personal life has finally become fulfilling, and living feels enjoyable now. There was a time when I was worried about what the future held, but now, it seems life will be good. It felt like my wife in heaven was smiling down at me, reassured. My name is John. I'm just an average real estate salesperson, still a regular employee after 15 years of service. At 35, I'm single, without a girlfriend or friends. I'm not very savvy and lack special skills. Even my junior colleagues outperform me. In a company, I've become quite a burden. That's why you can't close deals. You have to be more assertive, even pushy, to get commitments. After I finished a call with a client, my junior colleague, Kevin, said that to me. Kevin, 4 years my junior and already demonstrating great sales performance since joining the company, is rumored to be the next department head. Ah, right, I'll try that next time. You always say that, John, but you never really take anyone's advice. You've got to learn from the best. His tone was like a boss scolding a junior colleague. Well, it's always been like this, and the performance gap between Kevin and me is quite evident. Haha, sorry. I always manage to get by with a laugh. I do think Kevin has a point. But I just can't bring myself to like the idea of exploiting clients' weaknesses with aggressive tactics. It's not that it's wrong, it's just how things are done, but I've always thought that I wanted to make proposals more in line with what the client needs. And yet, here I am, getting lectured by my junior colleague because my performance doesn't back up my lofty ideals. Then, John, can we talk for a sec? It's not just my junior colleagues who lecture me, but naturally, my superiors too. After lunch, my boss, Kyle, called me out. Kyle, my supervisor and a department head 2 years my senior, has been my direct boss since I joined a company. So, it's fair to say he knows best about my lack of work performance. Earlier, you were getting lectured by Kevin again. When Kyle said that, I replied, yes, that was my response. It's embarrassing to have my boss hear about me being reprimanded by a junior colleague. Well, this is also a usual occurrence. Aren't you ashamed? Being outperformed and even admonished by someone 4 years younger. Don't you want to change, to take action? Without ambition, it's no surprise if people say you're holding us back. I'm sorry. It's not that I lack ambition. I wanted to build relationships with clients in my own way and improve my performance. That's what I used to think. But at some point, I began to resign myself to the situation, thinking, there's no way someone like me could achieve that. I feel a sort of disappointment in myself. Still, I'm trying my best in my own way, but after 15 years without change, it's understandable if people are frustrated with me. Sorry, but has saying sorry for 15 years led to any growth? Do you even realize you're a burden as your boss for so long? Think about my position too. If you don't have the motivation, just quit now, please, I'm begging you. Kyle, my department head, might also be getting complaints from higher-ups about my lack of progress. I can do that, I'm sorry. I'm aware that I'm not just unhelpful but actually a burden to the company. But I also lack the courage to quit and look for a new job. I don't think there's any company that would hire a 35-year-old like me with no significant achievements and low skills after 15 years as a regular employee. For such reasons, even knowing that staying might be a nuisance, I couldn't make the decision to leave. Geez. Kyle clicked his tongue and left the conference room. Then, one day, Kyle and I went to a subsidiary store for a meeting. The company, in the same industry, has a strong brand and is very dynamic, despite being a subsidiary. As a regular employee, I didn't get many opportunities like this, but today, due to a staff shortage, I got the chance. Mr. Anderson. Hello, I'm Shane, the manager here. Nice to meet you. The man who greeted me with a smile and a business card was a fresh-faced young man. Later, learning he was only 30 and already a manager impressed me. He was competent, polite to someone like me, and exuded a wonderful personality. He was the exact opposite of me, a truly dazzling presence. Most of the meeting was between Kyle and Shane, and I struggled just to follow the conversation. I felt utterly useless, wondering why I was even there. Kyle, and probably Shane too, must have sensed it. The more I thought about it, the more I sweated, making it even harder to concentrate. Just when the conversation seemed to be winding down, my work phone rang, and it was a client. When I checked with Shane if I could take the call, he said, "Of course, don't worry," so I answered immediately. The call was about changing an appointment for a contract explanation at the client's home. I responded while checking my schedule. After ending the call and about to return to the meeting. "Why did you agree to that?" Kyle, looking displeased, asked me that. Confused, I looked at him with wide eyes. You can't just keep accommodating every request from clients. If they think they can get anything they want, they'll keep calling for trivial things. That'll slow down our work and burden us. Do you understand? Even for small things. Don't always accommodate the client. Run things at our pace. I've told you this so many times. Why don't you get it? That's why you're still a regular employee, inefficient as ever. In front of Shane, Kyle lectured me just like he always did. Indeed, Kyle was right in this regard. I had been told this many times. But I've always had trouble accepting this. But the clients have their own circumstances too. If it's possible to adjust for them, shouldn't we? I timidly tried to counter. But Kyle invariably responded, "Who cares about their circumstances? Our prior commitments should take precedence." In the end, I couldn't argue back and just apologized, "I'm sorry." Then Kyle's phone rang, and he hurried out of the room. That left me and Shane alone in the meeting room. Shane then broke the silence, saying, "Are you always given such guidance?" He looked genuinely surprised. and rightfully so. For a 15-year veteran like me, older than him, to still be lectured by a superior must seem strange to someone on an elite career path like Shane. I felt so embarrassed and pathetic, I couldn't face Shane. Yes, that's how it is. It's pathetic, I know, especially at 35, but somehow, I just can't get on board with that way of thinking. Maybe I'm just not cut out for sales. I understand that being efficient would make work smoother, but I always end up wanting to prioritize the clients. That's why I'm perpetually at the bottom in performance and still a regular employee. I'm sorry. I answered with a laugh, trying to hide my embarrassment. I guess I was using self-deprecation and humor to shield myself, laughing off being lectured at my age and being a burden as a regular employee. But then, Shane said something unexpected. "Don't apologize. I think that's very admirable." His words were so surprising that I must have looked quite foolish. "What?" After my bewildered reaction, Shane continued. "I'm sorry if this sounds presumptuous, but I share the same view as you, Mr. Anderson. I believe that there's nothing more important in customer service than being attentive to the client's needs." Hearing someone say this was a first for me in my 15 years of working. Really, I was so happy that I leaned forward without thinking. Really, I had a similar experience when I was a newcomer. Shane began sharing stories about his own struggles and conflicts, similar to mine, from his early days until now. Listening to his incredible journey to becoming a young manager, I felt an immense sense of joy. And gradually, I felt more encouraged. But I don't have the confidence to overcome obstacles like you, Shane. I feel like I've reached my limits in terms of my abilities. However, talking to you today has been really great. It makes me want to keep trying and do what I can. I sincerely express my gratitude. We exchanged contact information after Shane suggested it. After that, Kyle returned, and we continued the meeting as usual, but my heart felt lighter. Over time, Shane and I grew closer, going out for drinks occasionally. Despite being my junior, he respected me and seemed to restore something like my lost self-esteem. Though our ages were quite different, it felt like I had made a friend for the first time. Then, one day while drinking as usual, Shane said something. "Mr. Anderson, I know this is a big ask, but would it be difficult for you to join our company? I never imagined that someone would make such a request to me." Me. I was utterly baffled. Then Shane explained, "Our company, and no offense to your parent company, but both seem to be prioritizing efficiency at the expense of customer service, almost like a lordly way of doing business. We're not struggling now because of our brand name, but this attitude could eventually be our downfall." Recently, in an internal meeting, we discussed how important it is to engage with customers, as you mentioned the other day. We need to instill this approach in our staff, and so, when I mentioned you, our executives expressed a strong desire to have you on board. If you're willing, we'd like you to join as the head of personnel development. This was an opportunity I never dreamed of. I had always thought my inefficient work style was a negative, but here was a chance to utilize it positively. Despite my anxieties about being up to the task, I thought this might be exactly what I was meant to do. So, I decided to give it a try. I immediately accepted, and within a week, it was official that I was moving to Shane's company. The news spread quickly within the company. But it was perceived as, John was so incompetent that he was demoted to a subsidiary. People looked at me with pity, but I didn't care anymore. I was excited to work with Shane in this new place. That's what I had decided. Before my transfer, a formal farewell party was planned. I knew nobody was really interested in me, and it felt obligatory, but I couldn't just skip it. Shane, feeling apologetic for subtly poaching me, wanted to attend the party as well. Given that the party was being held for me, I couldn't just skip it. Moreover, Shane, having suddenly recruited me, expressed a desire to make a farewell greeting, so I attended a farewell party with him. No one would be shocked by my sudden departure. In fact, they might even be relieved, but Shane probably didn't realize that. To celebrate Sean's transfer, cheers. I thought the toast might have been sarcastic, but I tried not to mind, given it was a farewell party. However, the sarcasm towards me didn't stop during the party. Without an incompetent junior colleague, I'll be in trouble with less work, joked Kyle. I'll remember not to be too incompetent, or I might get demoted to a subsidiary, laughed Kevin. Everyone seemed to be using the opportunity to throw jabs and sarcasm more than actually bidding farewell. Initially, Shane laughed along, thinking it was all in jest, but gradually, his expression darkened. I became nervous. I feared Shane might regret recruiting me, knowing how unpopular I was. After Kyle jokingly thanked Shane for taking on their big burden, saying, "It's clear that Shane is a young man with a generous heart and a spirit of volunteerism," Shane, who had been sitting quietly, stood up and responded, "Not at all. It is me who should be thanking you, Kyle, and everyone here, for your spirit of volunteerism." Kyle looked puzzled at his words. Shane continued, "To willingly let go of a person as exceptional as Mr. Anderson, who is outstanding as a human being, requires a generous heart indeed. Thank you very much." This remark surprised everyone, not just me. Everyone at the party, except for Shane, struggled to understand what he meant. A few seconds later, the room was filled with laughter. Everyone thought it was a joke to consider me an exceptional talent. Honestly, I thought the same. But Shane remained serious. Kyle responded with a laugh. "It's funny that you think he's exceptional." Shane, still not breaking his serious demeanor, replied, "I fail to see the humor. If after 15 years of working together, you can see Mr. Anderson's excellence, that's more amusing to me. Seems like you have blinders on." The room fell silent at this bold statement. Annoyed, Kyle retorted, "Impudent brat from a subsidiary," and the atmosphere soured. Just as I was about to stand up and intervene, Shane said, "Please look forward to seeing what our company will achieve," and with that, we left the party. Afterward, Shane apologized several times for getting heated, but honestly, I was happy. I had never met anyone who stood up for me like that. What's incredible is that Shane followed through on the bold stance he took that day. As the head of personal development, I did everything I could to meet Shane's expectations. I conveyed one simple message: being attentive to clients benefits both them and the company. This philosophy gradually became ingrained in our staff, leading to significant growth in sales. 5 years later, our subsidiary surpassed the parent company I used to work for. Seeing Kyle and others from the parent company now coming to us for training with a look of regret is something I'll never forget. 10 years have passed since then. I'm still working with Shane, as always. I've found fulfillment in my job and learned the joy of being needed by others. At 45, I'm still single, but my life feels much richer compared to 10 years ago. All of this is thanks to Shane, who recognized and leveraged my approach. I plan to continue doing my best here, living my life to the fullest.